Hello and welcome to 100% Real with Ruby. Today I have Aaron Scarfy back, and last time we spoke about dumb shit we see on social media among the mix where people demonize coffee, hormones. Is it your hormones or is it your lifestyle? So if you didn't listen to that one, go listen to that one. And then our very first one was everything females, weight loss, menstrual cycle, PCOS, blah, blah, blah. So you'll find it in the list. I'll put it in the description below what episodes they are as well. But today we are branching off the stuff that we see way too often and many of you still believe. And that's carbs, sugar, insulin, and the increase in gut and hormone experts. So with that, here's Aaron.
And I was say what's up, but I just realized this is probably an audio podcast, and doing the video, me putting my two fingers up like hello, it probably doesn't make sense for those that are listening. Apologies for that. But hello, everybody.
So with that, what do you think? What do you see as the biggest problem with this rise in gut and hormone experts? And why are people so adamant about sugar being the devil?
Well, I think they're two separate things. I haven't come across people that are claiming sugar is a problem for their gut, but I'm coming across obviously the two separate parties where we do have those that are getting into more functional health, functional medicine, and that's where that gut health I think falls for most people that aren't actually gut specialists. Like I have a very good friend in Gabby Fandaro, who's probably one of the world's leading researchers in gut health. And I've actually spoken to her quite a few times, and she's the first to admit that we don't know much. We're learning more and more as we go, but we still, in the grand scheme of things, don't know much. So what we do know is that with gut health, for a healthy, I guess a healthy gut, if you want to go with that sort of terminology, it's purely just making sure that, we reduce stress as much as possible and that we have plenty of variety in our fruits and vegetables for the millions and trillions actually of bacteria that go on in the stomach and, in the gut to help keep it as healthy as possible. If you wanted to break it into actual gut health specific, you have these trillions of like bacteria in your stomach that do a whole stack of things, and they basically react and change based on the food that you eat. So with that in mind, if you eat the same food day in, day out, your actual gut bacteria changes and gets used to that food, kind of like your metabolism, where it basically gets used to a calorie or an energy intake, and then it basically settles and works its functions off that energy intake. It's the same with your gut health and like your internal gut environment. It'll basically set itself based on the food that it's used to consuming. And a lot of the time when most people eat the same foods and then they go off plan, for example, and they might go have a free meal if that's what you suggested, or they just, happen to eat something completely out of the norm and they get bloated and they feel like crap. It's purely because your gut, like your biome, is so used to having this other food and digesting this other type of food that it's prepared for that. And then once you bring in something new, it like freaks out and spazzes out. It's like, okay, well, we need to try and sort this out with, the soldiers that we have, but the soldiers that we have are not built to fight all this new stuff that's going on in the stomach. So I think a lot of people are now starting to realize that and jump on the back of that and trying to say that, we can improve gut health by doing all these sorts of things. And don't get me wrong, there are definitely many ways to improve your gut health. The problem is diagnosing the gut problem. So once you know what the actual specific problem is, or have an idea of the specific problem, it's much easier then to go about trying to help recorrect it and, get on top of it. But in terms of actual gut health problems, it's really tricky to diagnose and get on top of. You really have to see a specialist and really get, basically tubes put down your throat into your stomach, all that sort of stuff, tubes up your butt, check your intestines and all that sort of stuff to really identify the potential issues. But, from the front foot, we can do things like trying to reduce stress, like all the stuff that we know that we need to do basically from a lifestyle point of view.
So when you say stress, a lot of people don't feel stressed. And at that same token, just like anything else, when people are really tight in the hips, they don't realize that they have this tightness or this thing going on until they know how good it feels to feel good. And with stress, it's not just the stress that you perceive as stress, but so many women have spent their life under eating, chronic dieting, and even overeating, but they're undernourished. They're not getting the right protein, the right minerals, the right vitamins. And then there's this rise in low carb diets and fucking stupid carnivore bloody dumbasses that don't realize how detrimental an overconsumption of red meat can be without enough veggies to supply the gut with a good healthy microbiome and the benefits of fiber. And then there's overtraining and the overpopularity of HIIT and burnouts, all while still under eating. And then you have people with chronic digestion and IBS and IBD and all this crap that they don't realize has been inflicted from their own behaviors. And the same goes with the metabolism.
Yeah, I mean, to address, I guess, some of those things more like the carnivore diet and, the low carb, no carb type scenario. So it's a funny conundrum because from a physiological standpoint, we don't necessarily need carbohydrates. It's a funny one because your body has this process where it's called gluconeogenesis. It'll break down protein, provided you're eating enough protein to basically convert to glycogen or glucose and use that to build and create ATP, which is energy that we use. So that process alone is very energy taxing. And it's why a lot of the low carb, high protein, keto, carnivore type diet people, they tend to get quite like lean and whatnot from doing that purely because it's an energy demanding process. So it's like you're eating energy to use a lot of energy. And it's like one of these weird little phenomenons we have. And it's like we know that from a dieting perspective, especially like bodybuilding comp prep and even powerlifting preps and stuff like that, when people need to diet down, it's always much more handy to have a higher protein consumption while we do drop either total calories or whether we do drop carbohydrates, purely for that reason, because we know that protein can then act as both carbohydrate and protein, provided protein's heavy and high enough. However, that process is so like laborious for the body that it usually has an end system, like an end goal. Like it's going to turn around and basically say, okay, I can't keep doing this, because usually energy intake is going to dictate how well it does it. So once energy drops too low, your body's just going to be like, okay, I can't keep doing this. And that's when you start to feel like crap. And that's quite prevalent in keto dieting versus carnivore dieting, because carnivore dieting seems to show that they eat way more food. They eat, I think, closer to 3.5 to 4 grams per kilo in terms of protein versus your keto diet, which is usually around the 2.5. So it's just interesting to see that they like to skip, especially carnivore, they do skip a whole stack of food groups, but like, yeah, fiber being the biggest one that, basically helps control cholesterol as well as blood sugars and all that sort of stuff, plays a big part. I do think that in probably 10, 15 years time, we'll see the research show how bad carnivore dieting is. It's just the research is probably not there just yet, because like anything, energy demands still trump everything. And it's kind of like there's that American guy that did the Macca's diet. He did it for 30 days and pretty much ate the entire menu back to front and still lost weight and improved his health. It's purely because he was in an energy deficit. So it was still so that same principle works. It's just, is that sustainable, or is that how you want to live versus the objective goal of losing weight and getting healthier?
And it's only until a certain point that that will work anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's the thing with a lot of research as well. It's very picky in who it chooses for the research, and a lot of it's short term, and it's not like you don't have a bloody like purple ball. This is what your life's gonna look like in like 5 years time. But speaking on the low carb part and the extreme dieting part, not only is this bad for the gut in itself, which we will bring up later on as well when I ask a different question, but then people go on to say, then I eat bad food, or I introduce carbs in again and I blow up, I gain weight, I get bloated, and all these other things that just lead them to staying stuck in the same yo-yo cycle. And they feel lost, but they don't understand why this very thing is happening. And they think that because they lost weight doing that exact same thing, they go back to it. And then they blame insulin, and then they blame sugar, and then they want to go all clean because...
Yeah. So with that, it's funny, like we were just sort of mentioning before, your gut gets used to certain foods. So if you're not eating, let's say, carbohydrates for, a good chunk of time, and when I say a good chunk of time, like I think it needs to take at least probably 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks at least, for your gut biome to start changing and adapting to the foods that you're eating. So once you reintroduce something like carbohydrates, the thing with carbohydrates is water. So water comes along with carbs. So I think the average is 1 gram of carbs, 4 grams of water, or something along those lines. The 1 to 4 ratio in my head is there. I just can't remember. I imagine it's 4 grams of water. So if you think about it that way, water comes with it because it needs to fill muscle. It's like we have this biological process called osmosis. So it's how it helps shuttle basically glucose and glucagon into the muscle, and basically into other facets of the body. And that's why it usually comes with water. Water's a transport system in our body, basically. So as well as hydration and all that sort of stuff. So with carbs, you're going to add a ton of water, well, not a ton, but you're going to add water weight. And then with water weight is that watery look. And that's where you see usually that scale increase. The thing is, like creatine, for example, what it does is it settles after a couple of weeks. So it's just being consistent with it and understanding the long-term process of reintroducing something like carbohydrates, because the short term may be like, oh crap, like I've put on a couple of kilos. The long term is, I didn't really put on any weight, I'm pretty good. It's because your muscles are filling back up with glycogen as well. So you have a good 500 to 800 grams, depending on how big you are, of weight that you can store literally in your muscles. So, if you round it up and go to nearly a kilogram, that's not fat. You've literally just filled your muscles an extra kilo with energy that's getting ready to use when you train. So there's all these different things that, carbohydrates can do and will do. And it's your first source of energy that your body will go to when it needs to do something like vigorous, needs something to do that, requires a quick burst of energy. It's not going to go to protein or fats because that takes too long to liberate. Carbohydrates is going to be like, okay, cool. We're going to go straight to your muscle. We're going to take all the energy out of your muscle because that's the fastest thing and the fastest transport system you have.
Yeah. And just to give an analogy of this, or an example of this, I should say, at the moment, I'm doing 2 really high carb days. And then he has me on low carb days. Well, not low, but low in comparison, like 400 to 600. My weight goes up 1.5 kilos every single time that I have those higher carb days. And if you think about it, that is the muscles filling up, because it goes back down by the end of the week. So did I really just gain weight or not? And that's the thing. People take things into the micro perspective, but then again, if you've been restricting carbs for so long, your body doesn't know how to process those carbs. So you need to give it time. There is nothing wrong with you. It's just that you're impatient and you're stressed out about food. And actually, this is a really important thing to touch on as well, is when you're stressed out about the very food you're eating, or you're stressed out about your weight, or you're stressed out about your body, and you are eating in that stressed out state, that has implications too. What are those implications?
The other thing is, when we look at stress, it's like you mentioned before, we have perceived stress and what we I guess, learn what stress is, right? So like we watch TV, we speak to our parents, we, learn at school, all these different factors that are what we call stress. But a lot of people, I think, ignore or don't understand the internal stresses that we have. And it's funny, I can use you as the best example because like you're like, oh, I don't need to deload, but then you get restless, it's struggling to digest food and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, well, these are signs of internal stress. There is something that is out of whack or is irregular, and that's, showing symptoms. And it's like, okay, well, these are potential signs of internal stress that we need to look at. So it's the same thing with most people that like struggle to get to sleep, for example, usually because there's something else going on, whether it's work related, life related, or whether they're in such a stress state that their brain and their body just simply can't relax and not start to produce, the required hormones to basically start your sleep cycle. Things like that, we need to like look at it and identify and help, I guess, navigate through. So stress isn't necessarily what you perceive day to day. There are other forms of stress, good and bad. And like we've said before, like training, for example, is stress. It's just the stress that we are wanting usually. And then we have those stresses that we don't want, like, your boss telling you off or something like that. But then also intolerances to food, like that bloating is stress. So there's so many different things for stress. And I think the easiest way I explain stress is things that throw you out of your normal routine or the way you feel.
Yeah, and that's the thing with like even a negative body image, even food stress.
100%. There's and the research now and being conducted and coming out on stress is so important because it does really show that getting on top of your ability to handle stress will go a long way into you achieving what it is you want to achieve from a physical standpoint.
Because people don't realize this, especially women, how do carbs help mitigate the cortisol response and the whole stress cycle?
So with carbohydrates, I mean, cortisol, I think, again, gets, called the demon hormone. Like, it's like, oh my God, it's so bad. Well, funnily enough, you can live without ingesting carbohydrates. So if you really wanted to go like, deep level sort of science, if you didn't eat another like single proper carbohydrate for the rest of your life, you could still live. And it'd suck because carbohydrates are phenomenal, but you can live. You can't live without cortisol. You'll die. So cortisol is its primary function is to wake you up when you're sleeping. So basically, your cortisol is highest in the morning because it's bringing you out of sleep. With that, it also has like all these different effects on like adrenaline. I was going to say ephedrine, definitely not ephedrine. Adrenaline and norepinephrine. So these are things that are used to help wake you up. They're also part of your fight-flight cycle. So it's like when you're in danger and your body's spiked up and it's like, oh, what do I do now? It basically sends a signal that cortisol is released and that it's ready to shuttle carbohydrates with cortisol into wherever it needs to go to start using energy quick because you're going to need to potentially throw a punch or sprint away. So it's why we try to get, like when we look at blood glucose readings and stuff like that, and we always want faster blood glucose readings in the morning. It's like we want to see what your blood glucose is doing in comparison to your cortisol and how it's responding. Because sometimes you can have a really high blood glucose reading, but it's not necessarily from your blood glucose or from your glucose intake, carbohydrate intake, your tolerance of glucose. It can sometimes be that your cortisol is just way out of whack. It could be too low or it could be too high, which could throw your blood glucose readings out and things like that. So in terms of its interactions with carbohydrates, it's a little bit in depth, but it's basically preparing you to use energy pretty quick. It doesn't make you like fat or anything like that. Cortisol doesn't make you fat.
Yeah, that's like insulin and cortisol both get bad names, which is why I mentioned many times the influence of leptin. And females actually have estrogen, which interacts with the whole metabolic adaptation process through that. And I want you to go into that detail, but there's this analogy I found with the whole carbs thing. you can run a marathon without shoes as well, but that doesn't make it easier
Exactly.
or fun. Like,
Yeah.
why would you want to? Your life is pretty much the marathon. Like your body is your marathon. It's not a short sprint, and then you just go back and resume as normal.
Yeah, you want to try and be as efficient and as healthy and as make life as easy as possible, right? If you can do that through nutritional intervention, I guess you'd be in my head you'd be silly not to. So it's just the tricky part is getting out of your own way and seeing the bigger picture. And I think that's where most people fall down. They get so stuck with the acute. So it's like, what's happened now all of a sudden, and it's like, well, no, we're looking at 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 5 months, 6 months, 5 years down the track, and how that's going to look, and how that's going to be beneficial to you.
We're going to definitely touch on that one later on when it comes to not staying in a diet. But talking of the leptin and the females, expand on that for the audience because pretty much everyone listening to this is a female of some sort that have been brought up scared of carbs and extreme dieting and the stuff that's out there. Like the things you are exposed to on social media were mainly for bodybuilders, and everything that isn't is for some stupid comp prep. And it's not something that, one, is sustainable for you. Two, it doesn't take into the way that female hormones work, like the way estrogen and your metabolism go hand in hand with leptin and carbs. So
yeah, I mean, it's a big cycle of things, and to try and keep it as simple as possible, I think we've touched on leptin and ghrelin before, but like from what we know, we know that leptin's basically made in the fat cells, right? So we know that your fat cells, the fatter you are, pretty much the more leptin you're going to produce, the more you're going to feel hungry, the more you're going to want to eat, so on and so forth. But we know that ghrelin's actually made in the stomach. So one's made from a signal in your head, sends it to the fat cells. It's like, okay, cool. We're hungry. We need energy. Eat food. And then we got your stomach that's like, okay, like I'm empty. I need food to start doing things, right? And we usually have a balance of leptin and ghrelin. But as we get bigger and bigger, that balance is, one, thrown out, and two, much, much harder to get on top of, because you're stuck in this cycle, this rut of just continually wanting to eat, because the actual hormone balance between the two is completely thrown out. Now, how does that come into play with like estrogen and all that sort of stuff? Well, if we look at a female's traditional menstrual cycle, we know that back end and front end have two primary hormones in estrogen and progesterone, right? So we know that the back end, basically from menstruation being, let's say, in an ideal picture perfect menstrual cycle is what, day 14, 15, 16-ish, to the back end there, towards our menses, towards your menses. I don't have a menses, last time I checked. Towards that back end, when progesterone's at its highest, well, that's when cravings kick in the most. So then we tend to see a kick up in leptin and ghrelin. Now, usually it's ghrelin that kicks up, I think, from memory. I've got to check that, but I'm very sure it was ghrelin, not leptin, that kicks up in that particular period of time, that turns around and says, well, I need more food. And that's where the other side to that is that you do have an increase in metabolism. It's very, very small, don't get me wrong, but it's enough to say, hey, I need a little bit more food. That then can continue a cycle of eating more food, making you a little bit bigger, week to week, month to month. Then it throws out the entire leptin ghrelin ratio and makes things much, much harder to get back to. When doing an energy deficit, we tend to bring a lot of hormone levels back into balance acutely, and then it's obviously trying to maintain that and keep that through.
So when it comes to extreme dieting or dieting for too long and leptin at really low levels, and then impacting the thyroid, impacting the sex hormones, and obviously once you have like a refeed of carbs or a diet break with carbs for long enough, that allows your leptin signals to actually like come back up for long enough. But the thing is, people, like you said, always look in the acute, and they're not willing to take time out of it a diet break, and they, like, especially females, don't realize the power of carbs in this, in that it allows you to get that performance benefit. It allows leptin signals to come back up to baseline so that your sex hormones still get the signaling.
Yeah, so there's a lot that carbs do, right? And I think it's a lot that energy does to many other systems, and that's where carbohydrates comes into play, because it is our fastest acting energy source. It's always best, not always best, but I mean, it's always better, I think, to have carbohydrates in for all these other functions. When you go through an extreme diet and you're dieting down to body fat levels and, you know, body weight levels that you wouldn't normally be at, like your metabolism, your body does adjust. So leptin, ghrelin, all these other hormones tend to adjust to that new environment. That's what the body does. It's really, really good usually at adjusting to things, provided you're there long enough. Then when you go to the flip side and you reintroduce food and foods that you haven't been eating, or you've been neglecting and that sort of stuff, yeah, you're going to have these acute spikes in things. Obviously things are going to change, but like with anything with the body, it usually levels out over time. And the biggest kicker to that is time. That people do not want to spend the time doing what needs to be done. I get a lot of clients, and like I own a gym here in Melbourne, and it's a very heavy gen pop type gym where I come across a lot of people, both male and female, that want to always just diet and diet and diet. And once you just literally ask them 1 or 2 questions about their diet history, and it's like they've been trying to diet for 2 years, and it's kind of like, well, that's the problem. You've been trying to diet for so long that we need to bring you back to a maintenance or new maintenance and build your calorie tolerance up so that we can get every other function back as optimal as possible or as healthy as possible, so that you are healthy enough to diet down. Because most people, again, Gen Pop scenario, are not healthy enough to diet. It's because they've been chronically trying to diet because they've read a magazine, watched TV, heard it from their sisters, uncles, brothers, cousins, dog's owner, that you need to do this, you need to do that. So then they try it and they put themselves at a detriment when, they probably, they probably should have seen, I guess, a nutritionist or a dietitian, but even then I know a lot of nutritionists and dietitians that suck. So yeah, it's tricky. Like it's not easy to diet on your own. So usually you'd have to turn around and say, okay, we're going to have to go through like a 5-month, 6-month period where we're just going to put you on more food. If anything, I want to increase your output because you're going to feel great. And hopefully we lose a little bit of body fat, probably not going to lose any weight, but we're going to change your body composition a little bit, hopefully, from a health standpoint.
5 or 6 months seems too long for probably the majority of people. And they're already looking forward to leaning up again or getting lean for the summer, when it's only just been right before summer where they started to prioritize rebuilding their shitty hormones and metabolism due to their lifestyle and choices. But why is this so important to zoom out of the acute and get out of this weight loss purgatory? Because you're mentally trying to lose weight. You're mentally trying to stay lean. Hey, I was there. We all know this. And you're physically not doing the things because your body is in such a suppressed state.
Well, it's funny because with female physiology, especially, your physiology is very, very dependent on fat and fat intake and what fat does from a hormonal standpoint. Basically, female hormones are really, really run and energized in a sense from fat. So to consume fat would probably mean you need to put on fat. Now, when I'm saying put on fat, I'm not saying you're going to be, morbidly obese. There's a difference. It's just having a little bit of body fat. So being lean year round, depending on your definition of lean, of course, probably isn't a way to go about it. And I know there's a couple of like coaches, even down here, bodybuilding coaches, that think that they want their female clients, physique clients, in a lean state year round. And it's kind of like, well, no, that's not how it works from a physiology standpoint. It's much more beneficial to go like up in body weight, increase a little bit of body fat, obviously to certain extents, not too far away from what you want, and then bringing it back down and that sort of stuff and fluctuating it, because you can build calorie tolerances. So that's what I like to do, even with my like lifestyle clients that are female, it's like, hey, we're just going to try and build your calorie tolerance over time. If you don't like it, well, this is for your benefit and your health, not for anything else. Like, you can find another coach who's just going to put you on, 1,000 calories a day, because again, you still can't outrun or outweigh or outwork or outsmart the equation of energy in, energy out. So there is a very simple way. You just consume less energy. You will still, by definition, lose weight. The difference is you're going to feel like absolute crap, because now your physiological functions that require more energy are not being done. So the whole point of like a 6-month phase to build your calories up and build your tolerance to food up is so that when you do diet down, yeah, your relative hunger cues are still going to be there. You're still going to feel hungry, but it's much better to be hungry at 2,500 calories than it is to be at 1,000 calories. So yeah, like I'd rather you be, because we know from a biology standpoint, physiology standpoint, your functions are still being met. Like they're still being met with the energy demands that they require. And the only thing that's really going on is your leptin and your ghrelin going, okay, well, I'm hungry. And it's like, well, too bad, you'll live. But we know that, your sex hormones are still going, you've still got a menstrual cycle, like all these sorts of things. Whereas if you start digging down into like 1,000 calories, a lot of those functions are going to disappear. And that's what we tend to see with most female physique clients, that most, not all, but most will lose their menstrual cycle leading into a show purely because of their energy deficit.
And the stress it incurs.
Well, yeah, and yeah, obviously the physiological stress that comes with that. But we can mitigate that, because if you can get a client's calories up nice and high, if I can get, like, I've got a couple of my girls that are on close to 3,000 calories. Like we diet them down. We diet them down on 2,300, 2,400. And they're like, oh, I'm starving. It's like, well, you're on 2,400 calories. Like, calm down. you stop being dramatic. You're fine. Like, it's just signaling that's telling you that you're hungry, not your actual body needing energy for its function.
It's funny for you guys listening to this. I remember back in 2017, 2018, I used to be like, oh my God, I just ate like 1,000 calories and it's 12 p.m. and I only have 4,400 left to eat. And I was just always focusing on food because I had such a small allowance to try to fit in. And then here I am trying to actually lose literal scale weight for powerlifting, trying to keep under and get under 56 kilos, because I knew that, well, in my head, my story was I can't actually drop scale weight, so I need to stay hovering around 56. But now it's like, if I was to consistently, without big days on the weekend, if I was to consistently eat like 2,400 calories, I'd be like, I need food right now because I'm going to like eat my hand off. And that's the difference in going through the process. And the way you see my body now, it wasn't like this for years up to now. Like I gained, like I'm like probably 4 kilos lighter than 3 to 4 kilos lighter than my heaviest that I've been doing a building cycle. But what would you say to the person who does say that 5 to 6 months is too long? Which, for reference, I did that building phase for like a year and a half.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, the longer the better, right? It's more so managing the mental health side and maintaining and helping maintain a positive outlook for the client. That's the hardest part. Dealing with a client's mental state is the trickiest thing that you can do as a coach. And it's trying to help them understand. If you can educate them and explain to them, I haven't really had any bite back from a client that I've actually personally spoken to and explained it kind of like we've just done, that, this is for your benefit and for your health. And it's like, I'm not here to facilitate your goal if it's going to make you unhealthy, because that goes against what I am about as a coach. Again, don't get me wrong, you can always go find a coach that will do what you want to do. It's just, like I've told you, it's going to suck and you're going to hate life and you're potentially going to cause more issues for yourself further down the track. If that person comes to me and says, well, 5 months is too long, and my question would be, well, why? Why is that too long? It's like, how long has it taken you to get to where you are? it's taken you that long. Well, then look, you you think it's taking you 5 years to get where you are, but 5 months is too long to start getting yourself back. Well, what's going on?
And you aren't even where you want to be right now. Has that even been working for you?
Yeah, exactly right. And it's like, look where you are with what you've been doing, and it hasn't worked. So let's try a different approach. It's like, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different outcome, right? It's like, well, why would I do the same thing again and again and again that you've been doing? It makes no sense to me.
And then you wonder why you have shitty gut health, which is exactly what we spoke about before with the stress and the chronic dieting. It's not something that is wrong with your gut. It's something that is wrong with your lifestyle, which is influencing your gut, which is why you're bloated, which is why you're feeling like shit.
Yeah, and then add in the stress of yourself, looking at yourself every day in the mirror or jumping on the scale, not seeing a change because you haven't changed anything because you're doing the same thing over and over, and then adding that stress in. So it's just all these cycles. Everything's a cycle.
And this is also why with a lot of my girls, I also get them to earn the right to use a scale, because no matter how much you try to say, like I had one of my girls finally ditch the scale yesterday after admitting that she was feeling so good until she wanted to check her progress on the scale. And, it didn't impact me because I told myself it didn't, but now I feel like shit. I'm like, so it did impact you? And she's like, yeah, but no, I can still use it. Or maybe that's me being in denial. I'm like, if you're actually trying to reason for getting rid of the scale, then you have an emotional attachment to it because you were just feeling amazing a second before. And she's like, actually, yeah, you're right. So many of us have been brought up wanting to shrink ourselves, chasing a number on the scale, having this number in our head. We don't even know what it's like to feel ourselves and what it's like to tap into how our body feels, because once you do that for long enough and you see progress outside of a number on the scale, that number on the scale becomes pretty much what it is to Aaron and what it is to me, and that's just data. And we understand it because we are actually finally tuned into our bodies, and it's not something that's going to be holding back our progress emotionally or physically. And I guess the same comes with entering this building phase physically, but not mentally, because that's still the same type of stress on your body.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, any form of dieting, either up or down, is always going to be stress. It's just which stress would you rather for what goal and what purpose, I guess. Force feeding is just as much as stress on the body as it is dieting down and eating, a little bit of food. So the body just perceives stress as stress, really. It doesn't necessarily be like, this is, mental stress, this is physical stress, this is, dietary stress. It's just like, it's stress. We're going to process most of it pretty much the same way.
That's exactly why you need to get your mind into the right spot.
Yep.
In either direction, because you're only going to be like hitting at something that's inert. It's not going to move no matter how many times you try to hit the thing. So what would you say for someone who's lost the weight and is now trying to build muscle and lose fat still at the same time, or stay at their smallest?
Yeah, look, losing fat while building muscle is such a nuanced thing. It's so minute. Newbies, so those new to the gym, you can probably get away with it for a period of time. Those that are detrained for a while, so haven't trained for a couple of months, you can probably get away with it for a little bit. Those that have experience in the gym training, and especially those that have a bit of experience in dieting, very, very, very tricky to do both at the same time. Usually you'd go one way and then the other. So if you're already lean enough, you'd just purely go through a surplus, doesn't have to be a big surplus. Doesn't have to be a surplus where you're force feeding yourself and you're like, oh my God, I can't eat another fucking piece of food. It can be just, hey, I'm pretty full. Like that's usually enough for most people to then build tissue on. And then it's obviously getting in the gym, lifting hip weight, progressive overload, all that sort of stuff.
You also have to be mindful that sometimes you need to not listen to your hunger cues and fullness cues, because if you've been having this history of fearing food and chronic dieting and irregular meal times, regardless of whether this is like dieting down or eating more, sometimes those hunger cues can be completely skewed up until you get to read yourself and learn yourself. Like, how many times have you went like a morning just running off coffee and then all of a sudden your appetite cues are completely skewed? Like, will you listen to that and eat the whole friggin' cheesecake?
No. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I actually depending on the client, like to play like when we have goals, it's like kind of like, when people diet down, they have a body weight or body image goal, but building up, it's really hard to find a goal when you're building up with a client. So for me, it's like, well, it's a calorie tolerance. It's like, well, how many calories can we get to? Like, let's guess what calorie total can we hit before we start seeing the downside, the side effects where we need to potentially hold or cut or do mini cuts and all that sort of stuff. And it just makes it a bit more fun. It's kind of like, okay, well, it's like, my guess is you can get to 3,000 calories. And then some clients are like, what? I'm like, yeah, 100%. I reckon you can get to 3,000 calories without any real body fat gain, like any crazy body fat gain that's outside our normal. And I think you can still progress and still be feeling good. And they're like, no way. I'm like, well, let's try it. And then they're like, yeah, they're all on board for it because they hear 3,000 calories. Holy shit. Because they want to be able to go tell their friends, guess what? I'm on 3,000 calories. So it's just, again, shifting that mindset is always a big one.
Yeah. And we can even use me for an example here as well. Like we're playing with the numbers to see what my body can tolerate as well. And of course, at first, there probably was a little bit of recomp because I was detrained from having a hamstring injury. And yeah, that didn't last all that long. But people think that they can build muscle without gaining some body fat. And then, like you said, there are coaches out there that are completely ludicrous saying you need to stay lean or this is how lean you should stay and all this other stuff that just gives false expectations. And because most things you see on Instagram are comp prep things that are done to the extreme, of people that live the lifestyle. Like Jenny down the road isn't putting up her whole lifestyle on Instagram, but she's scrolling it. And TikTok, let's just not talk about that trash side.
Yeah, fair. I don't have anything to do with TikTok at all. It's like when people on Instagram post TikTok, it's like if I wanted to watch TikTok, I just download TikTok. Stop posting them on Instagram. Does my head in.
Yeah, but you can't build muscle without gaining some body fat with that.
No, not unless you're on potential steroids.
Yeah, and if you don't come to that realization, you're going to be holding yourself back. Like if you always need constant reminders or constant like positive this, positive that, it's okay, I'm building my body, then that's when you need to slow down and pause and have those conversations that Aaron and I just had before. Like, has what you've been doing got you to where you want to be? But then if you're already looking forward to, say it's like spring or just winter's ending and you're already looking forward to shredding for the summer in like 4, 6, 8 weeks, you're not going to get the results you want, are you?
Well, no, exactly right. You got to give it time, right?
And I guess now something that I do want to bring up again is how people are now blaming chemicals for everything, because I feel like it's worth mentioning that it's not that it's sugar or it's chemicals per se. It's what's the majority of your diet made out of, and where are you now, and what is it that you can realistically start with right now? Because if you're going to just try to eat clean all the time, that's not good either, because you're not going to sustain that from the get-go when your lifestyle has been friggin' frozen things out of the frozen section at Woolies.
Yeah, I mean, look, to be honest with you, the frozen section at Woolies isn't that bad. So it's like, hey, this is pretty straightforward. You get 2 different fruits and 5 different veggies in a day. You're halfway there. Probably even more than that. You're probably 70% of the way there, because most people don't even do that. It's like literally as a kid, you're told eat your fruit, eat your vegetables. Well, it's for a reason, because they knew back then, before the research, that fruits and vegetables were kind of healthy for you. And how it actually interacts with your internal environment, your micronutrient profile and all that sort of stuff that, is quite important. No point getting on all these supplements all the time and, buying all these supplements from the chemist and, online on iHerb and all that crap, when you can probably kill most of those off with literally 2 fruits, 5 veggies a day. That's it. So simple, so easy. You do that and hit some protein targets, you're good. Like everything else will fall into place.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to bring that message to. It's you need to focus on the big rocks, because if you're always focusing on the sugar, the things to cut out, the things you need to do more of to burn more calories, whatever else, that's weight loss purgatory in its sense, because you're not looking at the long term, you're still looking at the acute. And then something else that we mentioned before is when you do start eating more food, you need to realize that you're adding more of a bulk to your belly, to your body. That's going to weigh more. If you're so used to chasing smaller, and eating bird-sized portions, your tummy isn't going to expand the same way from eating a big meal. And if you're snacking all the time, maybe you should look to the size of your meals, because if you've been trying to diet your whole life, you're trying to make tiny sized portions of meals because you need to fit your calorie budget, when you could actually just eat a bigger meal and not need to snack all the time.
Yeah, well, I guess the other side to that is what I always say to people is when they have more food, and it's like, well, I'm putting on weight, but your body fat hasn't climbed. It's kind of like, well, is food in your stomach fat? Like, obviously it's no. Okay, so then what are you worried about? You just got more food in your stomach. So when you get on the scale with more food in your stomach, you're not fatter. You're not technically heavier from a physiological standpoint. You just have food in your stomach. It's okay. Like, don't stress.
I said this on the other podcast, but I just saw it again. Some guy drank a huge up and go and ate a banana at the gym. And then he did one set and then he was like, oh shit, runs to the scale and weighs himself on the scale after he just drank like this big popper and banana. And that's the same equivalent. Like, well,
yeah, exactly right. It's just food weight and stomach weight is very, very different. So obviously an empty stomach and then getting on the scale. And it's like, if you have an empty stomach every single time you get on the scale and your scale weight's going up, you're either putting on mass, like you're putting on muscle, or you're putting on fat, or a bit of both. Or you're just putting on fat, depending on what you're doing.
Caveat, if you ate more carbs or salt the previous day, or you ate later than usual, then you'll still have shit in your gut.
Yeah, exactly. It's very hard to have gastric emptying. It's very, very difficult to be completely empty. So yeah, I wouldn't be concerned about scale weight going up if food's going up still. I mean, it's kind of the point. It's kind of your goal to increase scale weight.
And that's exactly why I say make sure you earn it first.
Yeah.
But you brought up something that I never even thought of, and it's probably something really important to rant home about in this podcast, is the things you see in the gym now being mainly Gen Pop, which is what the majority of people are. What do you usually see outside of the chronic dieting and all that kind of stuff?
With Gen Pop clients, man, it's just the thing that I see the most, the different diet fads and usually the stuff that you'll hear on the news or they'll see on like Facebook, like sugar this, carbohydrate that, keto this, carnivore that, paleo this. I don't think paleo is around that much anymore, but all those sort of dieting fads and like, which one's best. And the other thing that I usually see is the training side of things. And it's like variety in training, and you need to change your program every 4 weeks because your body gets used to it, all this sort of crap. So they're the two things that I tend to deal with the most when it comes to a Gen Pop client. And then trying to explain that, you don't need to change your program every 4 weeks, like at all. You can run the same program for 2 years if you really want to, provided you can progress it, then it's fine. Because that's how adaptation works.
Actually, here's a question. For people who say their quote unquote reverse diet didn't work, what do you typically see the issues are there?
They were in a deficit for too long. So with a reverse diet, you're still in a deficit, reversing out. Depends how long it takes you to reverse out. So more so, you don't need a reverse diet a Gen Pop client, just saying. If you're a contest client, different story. You probably do need to do some form of a reverse diet out, obviously, because you're in an extreme deficit. The faster you get to maintenance, the better. And hold maintenance. Yeah, you're going to have a few things out of whack, like all your cues and signaling are going to be out of whack. But I mean, you knew that going into the prep and dropping down to such low body fat levels that was going to happen. Holding maintenance and staying at maintenance for a period of time is going to be your best bet post-comp. Post-Gen Pop dieting, I mean, depending on how long they've been in that diet for, reverse dieting slowly and titrating calories up slowly is going to be probably more detrimental because it prolongs the overall deficit. So if you're dieting for 16 weeks and then you're going to do a 10-week reverse diet, you've actually been dieting for 26 weeks. Versus if you're doing a 16-week diet, 4-week reverse out, you're there for 20. So that 6 weeks can be a big difference, a game changer when it comes to coming back on the other side of health.
Yeah, And this is feeding back into the stress that we just spoke about, because all of that you're keeping yourself in a diet and you're mentally still feeling deprived. You're
You're physically still deprived.
Yeah,
you're still deprived because you're still in a deficit.
And your ghrelin levels are going to increase as soon as you start eating more food. And the thing is, your leptin stays suppressed, and the leptin is the one that tells you that you've eaten enough. So now you have ravenous hunger, but you're still trying to suppress your intake. So you have like this shitstorm, but at the same, like, if your performance is then impacted, that's why you fuck up your reverts, because you're eating more food, but you're not actually training harder. You're not putting 100% into it. You're probably licking, biting, chewing, because you're still in a freaking deficit and you're feeling deprived.
Well, yeah, and I think from a mental state as well, you should, in theory, you're like, well, I finished my dieting, so I can now eat food again. But eating that much food, well, it's because you're technically still dieting.
Perfect. So with that, I hope you all gained a lot from this podcast and took some notes. I encourage you, if you haven't yet given a period of time without a scale, to actually listen to your cues, and you're still worried about all of that stuff, then give it a go and see how you go, and actually ask yourself how your energy is, how your mood is. Have some other metrics of progress outside of numbers on the scale, outside of numbers in general. Like, honestly, ask yourself the question, what have you been doing for all of these months? Is 6 months really that long in retrospect? Do you see yourself in like 3 years from now?
The biggest thing, the best tell are photos. So it doesn't matter what numbers, even if you were to get girth measurements. I actually prefer girth measurements over scale weight most of the time. I only ever really use scale weight if we need to weigh in for something that requires you to be a certain weight, like obviously performance-based. For most of my lifestyle clients, it's girth measurements and photos. And it's just like, hey, like, here's week 1, here's week 4. Look, you look very, very different. You're either much leaner or you're much bigger based on the goal or the target. So, we're on track for what our goal is. So sometimes doing a photo, week 1, and then checking it at week 4 and being like, oh, okay, I've definitely changed. Well, then just keep doing what you're doing. And it's like, well, if you go from week 1 to week 4 and you haven't changed, or you've changed, but in the way you wouldn't have liked, well, you need to reassess what you did for that 4 weeks and be like, maybe I need to change something.
Yeah. So don't even compare your week 1 to week 2. Compare your week 1 to week 4. Your body isn't going to change that fast.
Well, that, and also obviously with females, menstrual cycle and stuff like that, each week is very, very different. So you want to compare each week of your cycle with the following or the concurrent week later. So it's like, week 1 and then week 1 again, week 2 and week 2 again, week 3 and week 3 again. So it's usually, again, 4 to 5 week cycles for hopefully most females. And if it's not, it's probably something to look at, but that's what you're probably trying to base it on.
Yeah. So with that, zoom the fuck out and actually invest in the long term, because that's where you get the most gains. And with that, I'm going to put Aaron's Instagram handle below and the other 2 podcasts he was on. Go find him at Elite Strength Coach, or just watch my stories because I tag him a lot and you can just click through that way. But with that, what is one sentence that you want to leave people with when it comes to weight training now?
Don't be a pansy. Now, it was more so literally Brad Schoenfeld posted yesterday some meme about still bros think you need to lift heavy to get big. It's like, oh, you're not big, shut up. So yes, you still need to lift heavy. You still need to lift heavy to get big, even though he's a PhD researcher in muscle. Like, shut up. You have no clue because you're not big. So get over it. Kind of like, the skinny guy going to the really big jack dude. Oh, I'll teach you how to train. Like, really? Like, what am I going to listen to you for? So yes, in training, still lift heavy, eat food, get jacked.
I love that.
It's always the goal.
I love that.
It's always the goal.
Yes. Who subscribes? If you subscribe, then rate the podcast and let us know that you subscribe to gains and leanness and badassery.
100%. That's how we do.
Bye, guys.
See you guys. Thanks for having me on.